I'm going to give you a very introduction to the project. This is actually a book that I wrote a couple of years ago, but it's the start of the book is actually a project that I did with a colleague, with Matthias Brand up in Regis University. And I'll give you more details in a second. So I'll show you some of the research that went behind the book, which I think you'll find fascinating. That's what made me want to write the book. And then we'll get into a Q&A, so I'll answer any questions you may actually have. So this is me. This is my life in one slide. Okay. So I'm originally from Spain. I came as an exchange student to Michigan when I was 17, and I fell in love with the U.S. My dad always said that I had a Yankee soul, so it wasn't difficult to actually get used to the U.S. I love Michigan, stay there. I went to Central Michigan University, got a couple of majors and several minors, and from there I went to Thunderbird. I don't know if you guys are familiar with Thunderbird, School of International Management. I got my master's, and right as soon as I was graduating from there, I ran into my future boss, F. Fernandez, which Javier may actually know him, but he was walking through the campus. I started talking to him, and he said, "You speak Spanish?" I said, "Yes, a little." And then he hired me for Nokia. So I started in sales and marketing in '94 with Nokia, and I was managing part of Latin America. Eventually, I just went through the ranks until I was managing everything but Mexico and Brazil. And then my wife got tired of living in Texas, and she said, "Juan, we need to do something else." So after my 4 daughters were born in Texas, we actually moved to Spain to manage a global account for Telefonica. Telefonica is a global mobile operator that has operations in Latin America, Europe, Morocco, and they have investments in China as well. So I worked there for about 5 years. Then my wife said again, "Juan, I'm getting bored of being here in Spain." You can see the recurring story here, correct? So then we moved to China, and we were living in China for a couple of years. And after a couple of years, I was the one that said, "Okay, I have enough of China. I need to move somewhere else." So we have been living in Beijing for about 2.5 years. You know what the air pollution is like there. So we needed some fresh air. We looked in the map, and then we drew some lines everywhere in the map, and we ended up in Colorado. So we've been here for about 10 years. I completed my doctorate in psychology, organizational psychology. I started working with Regis University at the College of Business there. Eventually, the Center for Creative Leadership, I don't know if you're familiar with it, but the Center for Creative Leadership also hired me to give executive workshops and programs. And then the University of Colorado, Colorado Springs, offered me a full-time job as well. So I've been full-time working for the University of Colorado for the last 5 years. I've been working for the Center for Creative Leadership another 5 years, more or less. And we're actually working in, part-time in one and then full-time in the other. Being a college professor actually gives me plenty of time. So I spend a lot of time doing other consulting work. And this is where the book actually started. So about 6 years ago, a good friend of mine, Matthias Brand, and former, also another Thunderbird alumni, reached out and said, "Hey, Juan, I have a project for you." So somebody came to me from the police department, Thornton Police Department. Thornton is north of Denver. And they would like for us to actually give them some cultural awareness training. I'm like, "Really? That's kind of weird." He's like, "Well, they actually called it diversity and inclusion." I'm like, "Okay, that sounds familiar." So we start doing a research. We put a training for these law enforcement agencies, and we start working with them. So we worked with them for about 2 to 3 years, did a lot of research. I'm a very research-based kind of individual. And we came out with a whole training, very successful, which he's still doing. I actually decided to do something else. So he's still doing those trainings. And we started teaching diversity, equity, and inclusion for law enforcement. Again, we actually took a different approach. So most of the diversity and inclusion trainings that the police had was the one where somebody comes in, he yells at them for about 40 minutes, telling them how horrible they are, and then they leave, and everybody checks a box, and everybody's happy. So the police chief of Thornton Police Department wanted to actually have something where the police officers would actually learn something about diversity and equity. So this is how we came out with it. And I'll show you some of the research that went into the book, and also some of the research we used for the trainings. But this is my multicultural type of background. I've been traveling pretty much everywhere. I was actually pretty much Javier's nightmare because I was the whole time in sales and marketing. I'm the one that actually expends money, and the CFO has to come to tell me, hey, you cannot spend that money. And I tell him, well, why? And then, so I met Javier when I was in Nokia. So that was, how I got to meet Javier a long time ago. Okay, so let me get started with some of the research. This is one of the most basic ideas that you probably are familiar with, which is the fact that there is no way to resolve problems with the same thinking that we created them with. So basically, we have to change our thinking when we're trying to resolve problems. And this will guide us into what we call critical thinking. So the way that we challenge our own thinking process. When we start looking at the issues that the police departments were facing in law enforcement, we actually noticed that a lot of those issues were related with the critical thinking that was necessary. So they were trying to resolve issues using solutions that had created those issues to start with. And what we did with my colleague Matthias Brand was actually change the way this was actually done. So we actually changed the critical thinking, and we presented them with examples so they could actually expand and be open to other ideas. And it was very successful. Most of the police officers came and told us that actually worked. Therefore, finally happy to have something that worked. For all this to happen, we have to start with one basic definition of what diversity is. And I like this one that came out a long time ago in 2008, because it lets you know that diversity is more than just gender, race, and ethnicity, like we usually talk about. It's actually also about age, religion, language, nationality, work style, where your education is from, your cultural background, organizational function, physical appearance. I mean, you have a lot of things that are affecting diversity. And this is something we have to take in consideration when we're trying to address any kind of diversity and inclusion issues that we may encounter in an organization. Diversity is more than just race, gender, nationality, or religion. It goes much farther. And the research shows that having diversity in your organization actually gives you quite a bit of money. It actually helps the organization produce more profits. It makes the company more profitable. It makes the company more creative. It makes the company be more efficient. Usually the solutions you come up with are actually more long-term as well. So from a financial point of view, diversity is actually something good. It is something that we can actually use, and it will help quite a bit. Now, when we think about culture, we have the tendency to think about our own culture. We have to also visualize the fact that sometimes our own culture may be what we call the dominant culture. The dominant culture is the one that the majority of individuals around us are usually attached to. And this culture can be created very easily, and I'll show you that in a second. But basically, a culture it's just a common language among different people. And dominant cultures have a tendency to actually hide the other subcultures you may actually find. So the biggest thing you have when you're talking about diversity is you have to first define who are you, and why are you doing the things you're doing. Many times those decisions are unconscious. It happened below the conscious level. And this is due to the fact that we have been raised in certain cultures. We have gotten used to do certain things, and we think those things are normal. We think that's the way of doing things. I love cooking. I don't know if you guys love cooking, but I love cooking. My mom had always told me, when you're going to cook something that has onions and garlic, start with the garlic, then add the onions, and then add the tomate and add everything, and then you make the sofrito afterwards, and then you add everything else. Well, now a lot of chefs are coming out saying, that's wrong. Yes, make the sofrito, but then take the sofrito out, leave half of it in the side, because guess what? If you cook with the sofrito from the beginning, the sofrito loses all its flavor. So keep half of the sofrito to add at the end of it, because that way you will actually be adding more flavor. It will be more fresh of a flavor. It's all cultural. The way we actually learn to cook, it's cultural. The way that we like to taste things is cultural. It really helps affect the way that we decide on changes and how we interact with other individuals. And the big thing again is that about 10% of our culture is something people can see. The way we dress, the way we actually move our hands, the way we speak, all that says the culture that is visible. It's kind of like the iceberg. The other 90% are things that we don't even know that we have. You know, I've been told many times that I use a lot of mannerism that my mother uses. I have never used, seen it before, but when somebody from the outside comes in and they see us together, say, wow, you guys are really using the same type of mannerism. Again, that's not 90% that I don't see. I may not even be conscious about that 90%, but I can see the other 10%. The other 10% is very visible. It's the way, that I dress, is the way I put my tie, maybe it's my schedule, how I like to give my schedule, my breakfast time, my lunch time, my dinner time, the way I cook at the kitchen. All that is actually that visible part, the custom, the mores, the courtesies, the books I like to read, my language, the way I actually speak. All that's the surface culture. But there is a very deep culture that we have to also deal with. And that's where you have a lot of the issues that come from excluding people and not being as diverse as you need to be. There was actually a very nice cartoon that I used to put in my presentation, but it's copyrighted, so I'm going to put it here. But basically, it showed, one lady being interviewed by about 6 different executives. All the executives are wearing exactly the same suit, same tie. And one of the executives is asking the lady candidate, so what can you actually bring to this company? Okay. And it's obvious what she can actually bring, the fact that she's coming with a different perspective. Okay. And that's something that it's all culture related. And here is when we start thinking about psychology. So the issue we are the way we are is because of these 4 hijackers that I'm presenting here. I'm going to talk about a couple of them, but I will not get into detail into all of them. One of them is confirmation bias. Confirmation bias is based on the fact that we usually take that information that we like and ignore everything else afterwards. So the information that confirms our beliefs, our values, we're saying, hey, that's top. I really love that. If it doesn't confirm our beliefs and values, like, that's wrong. There's something wrong there. Okay. And that's something that we do constantly. We do that constantly when we're in conversation. When you're talking to somebody and they're, talking to you about anything, take any issue you want nowadays, vaccination, pro or con vaccination. Then what you're going to do is, like, if you hear the ideas you like, you're going to say, yes, I'm all with you. If you hear something you don't like, you're like, whoa, hold on there. This is not something that we need to talk about. I think you are wrong. Again, we like to listen to the news that confirm whatever we think our ideas are. This is why here in the US is more evident than in other countries. You have, Fox News for one type of TV viewer, and then you have NBC, MSNBC, and you have all the other ones for all the others. Again, confirmation bias. We're trying to hear things that will confirm whatever we believe. Cognitive dissonance is related also with our values. But here is actually a little bit different. So when we talk about cognitive dissonance, we're thinking about any idea that being conflict with our own values and beliefs. So if you're working in an organization where basically you have a certain set of values, and those set of values are not aligned with your own values, eventually something is going to have to give. Either you'll go take a job somewhere else where the values are going to be more aligned with whatever you believe, or you're going to change your own values and accept the values that your corporation is trying to push on you. Cognitive dissonance is something that is extremely evident nowadays. This is why we have, so many people that have decided they're not going back to work. Why? Because their own values are not aligned with the values of the corporation. Some of them, it could be for the fact that they may be trying to spend more time with the family. That's a value, that's a belief. I need to spend more time here. The corporation is not accepting that. So therefore, I'm going to look for another job. And this is the right time to do it. So we actually run into these hijackers everywhere. And I'm not going to talk about all of these hijackers, but they are actually very common. Motivator reasoning, for example, is one of the ones that you will find kind of everywhere, which is basically you just take those ideas that confirm what you're doing and you're trying to push that to somebody else. You are ignoring everything else and you're trying to just basically reason based on ideas that are confirming your own belief. It's a little bit tied to confirmation bias. If I show you this right here, you probably have seen it. This is from the New York Times. It says, a father and his son are in a car accident. The father is killed and the son is seriously injured. The son is taken to the hospital where the surgeon says, I cannot operate because this boy is my son. Is this possible? Okay, I have actually played this many times for my own students. And everybody said, no, there must be an error somewhere. Why? Why is there an error? See, most people here would assume that the surgeon is actually a man. And therefore, how can you actually have a man? Now, this is from 2014. I have actually had people that say, no, this is actually pretty common because probably the father is married to another man. So you have actually two fathers. So this is actually common. And I'm saying, well, yeah, but could it be actually that the surgeon is a woman? Oh, I didn't think about that. Yes, actually, yes. So again, it's all about, the way that we perceive things. It's all about the filters that we use to read the information that we are trying to digest. And in this case, the biggest assumption that people make, and it varies by generation, by the way, would actually be that either the surgeon is a woman, it's a man, or that the surgeon happens to be another man, but he's actually a man who is married to the father of the son. Okay, so depending on where you actually, what generation you're coming from. Very interesting way, the way that our brain works. And it goes back to these ideas here. We actually lack similarity. We look for people that look like us. Our brain hates ambiguity. We have a brain that actually doesn't like ambiguity. When we have anything that is ambiguous, we come out with a story. And that story is related with things we already know. So we're grabbing things and adding that there, making certain assumptions, which may be based on stereotypes. And then suddenly, guess what? We have a story that has nothing to do with what was happening just because we couldn't accept the fact that there were differences and they were actually thinking about under a different type of prism. So there was something else here, but that's not the way we're thinking. The family that we belong to, the clan, the tribe, that only amplifies and radicalizes the way that we think. If we're always surrounded by people that think the same way we do, we're always going to be amplifying whatever our values and beliefs happen to be. Even if they are wrong or they are right, it doesn't really matter. They're going to be amplifying it. Okay, so we need to actually look for diversity to break that amplification, that radicalization. We need to figure out how can I actually think outside the box, meaning outside my value box. How do I go look at other cultures and take the good ideas as well? Because guess what? There are more good ideas out there than just my own ideas. We need to step away from the stereotyping. The stereotyping is basically what your brain does to be able to cope with ambiguity. So stereotyping is what you use to be able to take decisions quickly. If you see one glass of water, and then next to it, you see a different type of shape of glass of water, you're going to assume that it's a glass of water because it holds liquid, even though it may have a complete different shape than something you're familiar with. That's the stereotyping. We take something we know from here and we apply it over there. Same thing happened with people. Hey, I have met these individuals, they're from Mexico, and there's the stereotype that I have from Mexico. Now, when I meet somebody from Mexico, I say, oh, they must be the same people that I just met before from Mexico. So they might actually fit that little stereotype that I have from them. That allows me to actually engage in very quick conversations. Unfortunately, a lot of times when we do a stereotyping, we're making mistakes. And that's when we get into trouble. Okay, so we have to make sure that we're stepping outside the zone and start questioning some of the stereotypes that we actually have. There's this study that was conducted by Triplet, and they actually looked at these two pictures, and they presented this is when Senator Obama was a senator. He was actually the president of the United States. And they said, from these two pictures, who do you think will be a more effective leader? Now, I'll give you a chance. Who got the most votes? Okay. So who do you think would be a most effective leader in the United States? And I can actually, you can imagine who the most vote was received over here. Now, when they showed this different picture, for those of you that don't know, the guy on the right is actually Tony Blair. He was the Prime Minister of the UK. So when they asked them, who do you think would be a more effective leader in the United States, more people use Tony Blair as well, and you can see a pattern here. And this is related with the fact that a lot of times we're going to choose people that look like us. And again, we're part of the dominant culture. So we're always going to be relying on people that are from our dominant culture. And in this case, it could be something like skin color. The funniest thing about this is that we have a tendency to become radicalized very easily. This is from a study that happened in 1972 by a guy called Tarfel. And what this guy did is that basically he was teaching a class, and as people walked in, said, okay, you guys have to take this exam. And based on the result of the exams, I will be able to tell you if you are a Klee lover or you are a Kandinsky lover. Now, just a little parenthesis, everybody knows Kandinsky is much better than Klee, but I'm not going to get into it, okay? But they were actually assigned, you are either a Klee lover or you are a Kandinsky lover. Yes, by taking that exam, which by the way was all BS, there was nothing true or scientific about that exam. So basically, Tarjev was actually designed, okay, you guys are going to like Klee, you guys are going to like Kandinsky. Just by that, he could actually see behaviors that were in favor of people from their own clan. So people that had voted, that thought that they were more of a Klee lover, they were more likely to lend money to other people that actually like Klee as well. People that were Kandinsky lovers, they were more likely to actually give money to people that like Kandinsky, and less likely to actually give good interest rates to people that like Klee. They will get them a higher interest rate. More favorable conditions for the people that like Kandinsky if you like Kandinsky. And the same thing. They have done this study over and over. They have done it with jerseys from different football teams. And the same thing happened. One of them, they actually faked somebody having a heart attack or having a medical, and guess what? Anybody who was wearing a jersey from the opposite team, they would just walk by without assisting that person in the floor. It was only people that were wearing that same jersey that would stop to see what happens with this guy and actually gave them first aid help. Very interesting. Just by the shirt you're wearing, just by who they say that you like as a painter. Again, this is all about prejudice. This is all about bias, and it's a learned trait. It's something that we're not born with, and we are taught by our clan. We're taught by our family. And this is how prejudices and biases start. So we need to use critical thinking to be able to challenge some of these beliefs that we have here. It's all at the roots of what we're trying to do. So many times what it's interfering with us is our values, our beliefs, and it shows up as emotions. It shows up as reactions. We may have a certain belief, a certain reaction that when we run into a situation where that are challenging our views, our values, we react in that way. And we don't even know sometimes why we're reacting that way. And it's related with the fact that we're being challenged. We feel that we're being attacked. Where your values and your beliefs are attacked, your amygdala, which is what regulates your emotions, goes in overdrives. And it starts saying, okay, you're either going to fight, you're going to flee, or you're going to fly. What are you going to be doing here? And the other one is you basically are going to freeze. That's the other one, the other option you have. And the other one is appease. So how are you going to react when somebody's challenging your values and your beliefs? And it's because we're being challenged in a way that it's very deep in ourselves. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. And this is very important to remember. We don't see things as they are. We see things as we are. We use filters that we have actually learned from watching our families members, from our friends, from our community. It's very easy to actually become a member of a different community. If you start going to any kind of club, eventually you're going to favor those individuals from that club versus any other person you may interact with that day, just because they have become your clan, they have become your tribe. So what is culture? To start with, let me just make this comment here. When we talk about culture, it's very easy to fall into defining culture as something that is very clear, that encompasses many people. The truth is that that's just an aggregate. I'm from Spain. I can tell you that there is not too many Spaniards that are like me. When you go to Spain, you will find that Spaniards are actually different. They are not all the same. You may even find Spaniards that don't like jamon serrano. They are wrong, but they may not actually like jamon serrano. So you find those kind of Spaniards. So all we're doing when we talk about culture is using an aggregate. We're using a consolidation of different conditions. And I like this definition from Georg Hofstede. And he said that basically the collective programming of the mind that distinguishes one group or category of people from another. Collective programming. I like that because it tells you that this is something you actually learn. This is something you have been programmed to do. Okay. And then Edward Hall also said that it's the invisible barrier that separates individuals. Very powerful definitions. And this is the other triangle when you look at a culture. So you have different aspects here. The first one is the conscious. That's that 10% we talked about with the iceberg. Then you have about 80% that it's the culture, is the unconscious level. Then you have the genetic, the universal. So when we're born, for example, we're born with certain fears. Where we fear loud noises. We fear crawly things. We fear, things that could actually harm us. And this is actually programmed in our mind, and it's been genetically passed from one individual to the other. If we look at this, this is just basically our survival instincts. This is how we survive when we were, prehistorical mans. You had the saber-toothed tiger that could jump out of some place, and that when something moves behind a bush, it could eat you, so you start running. And this is just part of the genetics. People that run were able to save their lives, even if they were wrong once in a while. People that just froze there usually became food for something else. And our brain has actually trained us to survive, and that's what we get there. I really like this definition from Trompenaars, and I saw this in a presentation a couple of years ago. And Fons Trompenaars was actually saying that we're not like a pyramid, we're more like an onion. And he was saying that the inside of the onion is the most private part. It's so private that sometimes we don't even know that we have those things, those thoughts, those values, those norms, because they are very ours. People may observe it, but you cannot actually explain to somebody why you do the things you actually do, because they are such basic assumptions that we assume everybody's assuming the same thing, and it's wrong. Not everybody assumes the same thing, and that's the more private one. As we move towards the outside, we go more into the explicit culture, and this explicit culture is more public. These things you actually see is how you address people. You may have actually seen people with their social distancing, and that was very hard in some Latin countries. In Latin countries, as you all know, we like to hug each other. We like to pat somebody's back and just give them a little hug, and then suddenly you're saying, no, you have to stay 6 feet away from me. It's like, whoa, what's going on here? Suddenly we actually feel attacked, because that's our core. Our cold culture says that we have to be more embracing, warmer. That's how we show that we care for somebody. That's how we show affection. We actually hug them, with stuff like that. And then suddenly we're going to do that stuff. Again, this is when the private becomes public. This is when we realize that, okay, hugging somebody, patting them in the back, and having a nice long handshake, that's something that is from my culture. And you're saying I cannot actually practice that? This is like you're throwing something away from me, and this is one of the reasons why I like this onion from Trompenaars, because it shows you that sometimes those inner thoughts, those inner feelings actually come to the outside, because they're forced to the outside because of different things. In this case, could be the COVID pandemic. This is with Frank Hofstede, Georg Hofstede, and he came out with different ways of looking at culture. So he started studying in 1972. He was working at IBM, and he was working all over the world. And he noticed that there were certain differences between people that work in IBM in Copenhagen versus Mexico versus the US. So he started studying culture, and realized that the differences that he was seeing were what he called national cultures. So there was one corporate culture that everybody was working with, but then there was national differences based on where that person came from. And he came out with these ideas here of high power distance, low power distance, uncertainty avoidance, which is risk averse, individualism versus collectivism, masculinity versus femininity, short term versus long term. And there's one more that he recently came out with as well. So that was a way of looking at culture. And it has a huge impact on the way we interact with each other. Let's think about the corporate world, for example. If you're working in a place like Australia is extremely informal when it comes to work. You can easily walk into somebody's office, your superior, ask them questions. It was the same thing when we were in Nokia. I remember that Oli-Pekka Kalasvuo at the time was the CEO. He would come down to the cafeteria and eat with everybody down in the cafeteria. Nokia was very flat, very low power distance. Now you go all the way up to the higher side, India, for example. India used to have a caste system, and they still have it, but now it's technically supposed to be illegal. And they are very high power distance. There's a very clear hierarchical way of doing things, and you have to stick to that. And that's something that affects the way that we behave with each other. At the same time, if your boss happened to be from Australia, he may be expecting you to be a little more casual, a little bit closer, to come to them. So when he sees that you are very formal, he's like, well, why is he being so formal? Maybe he doesn't like me. That's when we get into the assumptions. That's when we get about the different stories. It's all about culture. One is used to certain ways of communicating with one's boss, and the other one is used to being to communicate a different way. So just because of that power distance, we may create a way of a stereotype that actually it doesn't fit the way that we deal with individuals. It may be a point where there's a conflict just because the cultural aspect, our cultural approach to authority is actually completely different. Okay. The same thing happens with many other aspects. Individualism versus collectivism. Americans are very individual. So most of them will define their family as their nuclear family. If you talk to most people in Latin America, many people in Asia, when you are talking about their family, they will tell you it's not just my family, my nuclear family. It's also, my great uncles. It's also my cousins. And by the way, I go all the way to seventh cousin. Because the family is anybody who is blood related, regardless of how far they may be. When I go to my parents' village in Spain, in Blanca Murcia, everybody's a cousin of mine. So everybody goes by and says, hey, primo, ¿cómo estás? Everybody seems to be a cousin of mine. There's some of them I have never met in my life, but they know my parents or they know my grandparents. So therefore they must be, somehow related to me. I don't know if that's true or not. It's the little village of 6,000 people. It seems like 3,000 of them are my cousins. I'm not clear about that. So again, this is all just the collectivism versus the individualism aspect of culture. And the thing that I mentioned in my book is that you can actually measure many of these things. And this is something that is very important. So when you're dealing with somebody else in your teams, and here I'm thinking about organizations, since most of us are in an organizational world, in the corporate world, there's ways you can actually measure different traits. So you can see what you may have actually potential conflicts. So this one right here, this is from Erin Myers. So Erin Myers came out with this thing that she called the culture map. And on the culture map, which you can easily do by going to one of those two links, you can actually figure out, for example, how do you like to communicate? Do you like to communicate in what they call low context or high context? Low context will be somewhere where pretty much you don't need to say much because everybody's operating under the same assumptions. Okay, everybody comes from the same background. So when you say something, you say the horse, everybody knows what a horse is. You go all the way to the high context. High context is when you have to be reading between the lines. So somebody tells you horse and you're thinking, oh, what are they talking about there? Why are they talking about horses? And you have to actually read meanings between the lines. What do they, is that like a powers symbol? So you have to actually be looking at many more details than you did before. So high context, there's a lot of reading between the lines. So if you know that you're dealing with somebody who is like that, you need to use very specific language. And you may actually have to tell them that, hey, what I'm telling you is what there is. There's nothing else. Don't try to read between the lines. Okay, and that's some of the tactics that you will have to take here. So this is from the culture map from Erin Meyer. There are other tools you can actually use. I wrote an article about 4 years ago where I said that one of the best ways before you actually are assigned for any kind of expat position will be to actually analyze your different culture from different perspectives. The Culture Intelligence Center, which is out of Michigan, has a great way of analyzing everything related with your cultural values. So they actually take you as a person and they tell you, they give you a pretty nice profile. One of the things that we do at the Center for Career Leadership is that we use different assessments to actually see how members from different groups actually work together. We use different assessment to do this. You could use the culture intelligence, for example, to do this. You will actually figure out, okay, for example, who is more short-term oriented versus more long-term oriented. Why is this important? Because there is a very different way that we approach our works if we're more of a short-term oriented, looking for short-term benefits versus a long-term oriented. And that could be frustrating for some individuals. Sales, we're very short-term oriented. We want the results right now. We want to make the sale so we can get the commission and move on to the next one. Other individuals may be more learn-oriented. So finance, you may have long-term projects. You may have actually long-term capital investments. So that's more long-term investments. So you need to find a way of communicating with each other. As I mentioned before, Hofstede, you can also measure where you fit between the different lines. And look at here. This is actually a very good example of my scores, which you will see where it says my scores in the blue line versus my home country scores, which is Spain. As you can see, there's a lot of differences. For example, power distance. I'm much flatter because of my experiences, my learnings. I'm very low when it comes to power distance. I'm actually very informal. When I was, people in Spain are right in the middle. China, where I was going to, this is when I did this study, is much higher. They expect a much higher level of formality or more hierarchical respect. That gave me hints. That gave me things that I had to actually do. For example, I had to emphasize that maybe my title was a little bit higher than it really was, just so people would be able to talk to me. Because you will go to see a VP, my title was a director, and they were saying, hold on, I'm a VP, you're a director, you shouldn't be talking to me. You should be talking to my directors. But guess what? A director in Nokia is not the same thing as a director in your company. So I need to talk to you because you are the VP. So maybe I have another business card that says VP of whatever, so I can actually talk to the VP as well. This is the kind of things you find out through this assessment, and is able to actually help you identify and take advantage of that diversity you may have within your own organization and avoid some of those communication conflicts. The COSI group does a very good assessment where they look at an intercultural effectiveness scale. And what they're looking at is like, how effective are you at communicating? So there's a whole chapter in my book where I actually just dedicated to giving you solutions how you can know more about yourself. The more you know about yourself, you're going to be the closer to your best. And basically, intercultural effectiveness scale provides you a very good idea about how open you are to other people's idea. How quick are you from learning when you are in a different cultural environment? It talks about emotional resilience. So what happens when you have setbacks, when things that you thought were going one way went different because of culture? Very good information you can actually get. So these are some of the assessments that you can actually take to figure out, okay, what is my cultural background? What is the potential area of conflict when I'm talking about diversity and equity? And we go back to thinking at the end. So basically, most of us have a very egocentric way of thinking. It is true because I believe, it is true because we believe it, it is true because I want to believe it, it is true because I have always believed it, it is true because it is my selfish interest to believe it. Okay, that's a very egocentric way of thinking, but it comes out from the center, it comes out from our own values. We actually ask our law enforcement officers to try to change the prism and go to critical thinking questions, such as, what information am I using that comes to this conclusion? So basically, why am I thinking the way I'm thinking? Challenge your assumptions. So just because you're assuming something doesn't make it true. So what assumptions have led me to this conclusion? What is it? Some of the stuff that I'm thinking, I'm building my conclusions on that may not be true. Am I making any kind of interpretation of the information that I'm receiving? So critical thinking is very important when it comes to challenge yourself and avoid some of those diversity problems, diversity challenges that you may actually run into. And when I did my dissertation, I actually looked at the fact that a lot of times when we're running into diversity issues, we run into more than just that. We actually run into different ways of incivility. So my dissertation was about incivility, burnout, cynicism. And what I noticed, for example, is that when people go through many changes, the level of cynicism, the level of incivility actually goes up, as well as the level of burnout. So I studied Nokia, as Javier would tell you. Nokia was known for their saying of if it ain't broken, break it, which meant that they actually kept breaking things and they kept reorganizing themselves over and over and over. You know, that created a lot of change, that created a lot of frustration. All that frustration creates certain levels of incivility, and that usually ends up in psychological distress. So people end up with mental fatigue, alignment, disengagement. Why is this important when it comes to diversity? When we have some of these issues like job dissatisfaction, burnout, we have a tendency to go back into our center of gravity, which is our values, our unconscious. So we become even more discriminating. We actually start using even more stereotypes that we're using before. We become more of a radicalized individual when it comes to our values and beliefs. And that's a big issue, because nowadays, guess what? Our organizations are changing over and over and over constantly. We live in a VUCA world, a world that is volatile, that is uncertain, that is complex, that is ambiguous. We keep changing over and over and over, which makes that some individual more stressed. When you're more stressed, you fall back into your more in-depth type of feelings. And that's why we run into a lot of diversity challenges. And that's an issue that we may have. So just to summarize a little bit, and then we'll go into Q&A. Beware that the stereotypes are necessary, but there's also limitations. Always try to use your critical thinking. Critical thinking is going to be one of the best ways of thinking, approaching anything that you may have. Beware of the confirmation bias and all those hijackers. Are going to see for the information that agrees with what we are, but they're going to ignore anything else that contradicts what we're thinking. Challenge yourself. Surround yourself with people that have different perspective. Diversity is great. Diversity will bring profits to your organization. Diversity will actually make you more creative. You will make more money as an organization with more diversity. Okay. And then I would just leave you with this. So this is actually saying that I love, which is basically one evening, an old Cherokee told his grandson about a battle that goes inside people. He said, "My son, the battle is between two wolves inside us all. One is evil. It is anger, jealousy, sorrow, regrets, greed, arrogance, self-pity, guilt, resentment, lies, false pride, superiority, and ego. The other is good. It is joy, peace, love, hope, serenity, humility, kindness, benevolence, empathy, compassion, and faith." So the grandson thought about it and for a minute, and then asked his grandfather, "Which wolf will win?" And the old Cherokee replies, "The one you feed." Okay, so let's try to make sure that we're always feeding the good wolf inside of us. And with that, I will take any questions you may actually have. You know, happy to answer any questions you may have about my research or about my book, whatever you like. I'll stop sharing now.
Right, excellent. Thank you, Juan Maria. I really appreciate the presentation and the availability to be with us. Just trying to take it more into the, at least again, this is the way that I'm thinking, taking it more into the, one thing before I forget, if you can go and put your contact information in the chat, so whoever wants to contact you for any other reason, they can go and, directly contact you. But my concern was more if you can provide more examples about corporate culture. I have been doing lately a lot of work for private equity firms, and the private equity firms, they have, it doesn't matter what company it is, they have a clear idea about the client. And when you go to the client or to the company they're investing in, it's not, to me, it's not the true view. But obviously, I'm not, it seems like I don't have the model, or I know it's not maybe the model. I believe that there are more things to say about why they are coming with this definition, why this company, they need help. And especially here in Florida, which you will find more and more, and at least what I have found in this level of companies, let's say 100 million and below, you have so many different people from the Caribbean, from Europe, from Eastern Europe, from Latin America. for instance, in one group, I remember I had a guy from Syria, one from Trinidad, one from Halidia, which it's their own culture. A woman who came from Pennsylvania, moved like 20, 15 years ago. And they were all, like 3-4 feet away, one desk to the other. And sometimes it was impossible to put that group of people together in the same pace. When they had to go and close the month, they were not able to really, I had to be like a teacher. I used to go say, listen, guys, this is what you need to do. Boom. Because they couldn't communicate. They I mean, that's what I'm trying to find out. If you have some examples that you can share.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, one of the big issues, and I was just talking about this with a colleague this morning. So as I mentioned, I work for the Center for Career Leadership. So we are hired by companies that are having conflicts sometimes. And one of those things that I tell is that you have to be able to separate conflicts that are personal from professional conflicts. Okay. A lot of times we get to work with people that we don't really enjoy personally, but they may be great professionals. So when we are able to actually divorce the personal conflict from the corporate conflict, that's when we start making some progress. And that's done in many different ways. So for example, one of the things that we found that is the most efficient is actually helping people understand themselves. Some individuals don't realize the things that they're doing because basically there's a portion of your life that people notice, but you are not even aware of yourself of doing those things. You may also have you learn there from feedback from other individuals. You may also have a certain part that you don't want to tell other individuals. So you may have an issue at home where maybe you have a sick relatives, and that's creating a lot of stress at home. But for some reason, you don't want to share that. You may think that that's personal, but since it's affecting you at work, and there is no way to separate work from life, we don't just go to the office and we say, okay, now I'm going to be just me, professional me, and whatever happens at home happens at home. It doesn't happen like that. If you are having issues at home, they're going to translate somehow into your workplace. So you need to figure out, how do I deal with those? How much information do I need to share with these individuals so they know that maybe today is not the best day to come and give me feedback about what I did in a meeting? So you have to get them to actually talk. One of the best ways to talk is by starting talking about common things. So actually design a common goal. So that's one of the most effective manners. I remember once seeing an interview between a pro-Trump and against Trump person, okay? And they were just going at it, just not. And then suddenly one of them stops and says, okay, can we all agree that he wears his tie in a ridiculous manner? And they both start laughing, and they say, yes, and then from there on, the dialogue was different. Now, they did not agree with everything, but at least they started talking to each other. And that's when you need to figure out. You need to figure out, okay, what can we find in common so we can all work together and make sure that we have somebody who facilitates the dialogue that separates what's personal versus what's actually professional. And that's very complicated. Thank you for the question, Javier.
But for large companies, what I remember is that we used to have this induction, what it used to be called induction in HR, and they give you like, hey, this is the way that we do stuff here. So everybody should go and, follow this thing.
Yeah. Nowadays, that's what they call onboarding. And now that's changing.
Right. Yeah. But now when you go to smaller companies, like I said, I mean, I remember even in this group that I just mentioned, one day, this guy from Syria, from the Middle East, came almost yelling to me. And I don't know from where he was coming, because I was not really, in my mind, it was not a big deal. But for him, that this woman told him to just kind of shut up and relax was a big thing. And he came to me and said, listen, did you hear what she told me, the way that she talked to me? And I remember I was working. I looked at him and I said, what's going on here? Someone dying here? And so, it's the cultural background is very important, like you said. But I remember, like I said, that in large companies, maybe you can tame that, and I don't know if it works, but you can tame that, telling them, okay, these are the rules of the game. But when you have a small companies, maybe it's more difficult.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm working with a very small company out of Washington state. One of the practices they have is great, which is once you get onboarded, so they tell you about the processes. So this is how things work. But then after 1 month, the CEO, okay, it's a small company. So the CEO would actually call you and say, okay, you've been here a month. Now tell me everything we're doing wrong. Okay. Before you get integrated into our tribe, into our clan, tell me now that you come from the outside, everything that we're doing wrong. And it's one of the most creative, most successful companies. This is a company that is growing profit-wise over 400%. They just hired 200 people when they were technically still under, closed down because of the pandemic. They hired 200 more people. They are growing very quick, biotech, very successful. And that's one of the things they're doing. They actually want to know the things that they're doing wrong, so they don't fall exactly in what you just mentioned, Javier, which is the fact that some companies say this is the way that we do things and this is the way of the highway, and you have to challenge that way of thinking because there's other ways of doing different things. That's a good practice of that I've seen out there that helps quite a bit. You hire somebody new, take advantage that they are new, and after about a month, ask them, what is everything that we're doing wrong? What is some of the assumptions that we have as an organization that maybe we should be challenging? That's very important.
I got a comment. Actually, a quick story and then a comment. Many years ago, I was eating in North Miami Beach at I think it was like Ukrainian restaurant. It was like an ethnic restaurant. And there was a busboy that just came over to the United States from, I think, the Ukraine or one of the Baltic states, and he had a noticeable body odor. He was, and we and my friends that I was with got to talking to him, and he said, "Yeah, I just arrived," and blah blah blah. So I said to my friends, when we pay and get up, I'm going to go talk to him. And so as soon as we paid the bill and we got up, the two friends scattered. And I walked over to this guy and I said, "Can I talk to you again?" And he said, "Sure." And I said, "Listen, I know he was young. I was young too, but he was younger than me." And I said, "I don't know where you're from. I don't know how it is in your country, but here in the United States, any body odor is looked upon as negative. And I could tell that you have a body odor. I'm not saying it's good or bad. I just want you to know that if you wear a body odor, you're going to get a certain response here." And he was so appreciative. He walked me 400 yards to my car, thanking me so much for that distinction. Okay, that's my little story. My question is this. You mentioned at the end of your talk that diversity is good. And I have D&I going on big time in my company, Assured Partners, and I see it in many organizations. And so my question is, do you think that this corporate movement is going to penetrate societal divide? Because this is in corporate America, we're trying to bring people together in a country that is divided. What do you think about that sort of paradigm?
I mean, the studies show that diversity is good for your company. So that's something that has been studied and it shows that it's good. Now, is the movement for DEI going to be changed the way that we do things? No, because when corporations do it, a lot of times we're doing it just because we need to do it, because we need to put up a facade. We need to actually tell people, hey, we're doing it. We're doing it more because of a legal aspect, law enforcement. Law enforcement, every 2 years, they have to take a DEI training. It doesn't mean that they're changing their ways. And this is why my friend and I took a different approach to actually try to tell them that, okay, there's things you can actually learn, things that you can take a benefit. For example, in one of the ones we work with, one of the police departments, they had a big issue with a very large Russian migrant population. And they were facing the fact that most Russians don't see the local police as real enforcement or as real legal enforcement. So we actually taught them certain ways of approaching them. So if you know anything about Russians, church comes first, then you have the Russian government, and then you have the army. So how do you actually approach them? Through the church. So you went to there, you're the Orthodox Christians, and you actually get involved with that community, and you don't try to, so just build that relationship. The other thing you need to know is that while Russians may speak bad about Russians, if you're not Russian, you better don't speak bad about any Russians, because that's not good, So we teach them little things like that, and that actually helped them quite a bit be able to make an inward into their community, the Russian community. That's how you actually change things in the world. You change things, but actually finding common grounds and respecting certain differences that you have to do. Now, in today's polarization and political polarization that we have, I would say that, hey, in the old times, you used to go to dinner and don't speak about politics. You actually spoke about anything you wanted, but you didn't speak about politics. So why do we feel the need to actually talk about politics every single damn lunch, dinner we have with somebody? I was the other day coming back from San Diego, and I had the guy next to me start talking to me about politics. So I switched the conversation very quickly, and we talked about what was he doing in Las Vegas? Did he like Las Vegas? Or what was his experience there? And then we had a nice conversation. Now that could never happen if we would have stopped to talk to politics, because one, either he would align with my politics, and then we would have had a conversation about just basically echoing each other's ideas, which would be kind of boring, or we would have had a major fight. I have very good friends, and Javier knows some of them, that actually are diehard to one way or the other from the political point of view. I don't talk politics with them, and I'm still very good friends with them. So diversity, it goes beyond the fact. You need to know that people may have different ideas. You have to respect them. And if you are in an organization, there's general rules that people need to follow. So for example, when you promote somebody, you should be doing it on the base of merit, not on the base of what they look like, or how much they look like you, or who you have the most lunch with, or who the funniest person is. And merit is actually very important to take. But yeah, Robert, to be honest with you, I don't think that these DEI programs at the corporate level are going to be changing the overall society. I don't think that's going to happen.
Well, it's like chicken soup. It can't hurt.
Exactly. It's good for the heart.
I have a quick question for you. Well, first, thank you so much for spending the time with us here. So I really appreciate it. A lot of good points. Talking about the iceberg, right? When you were talking through that, I was thinking about the book that a former Disney CEO wrote, Bob Iger, The Ride of a Lifetime. And he dedicated one whole chapter about how he made a lot of decisions based on if they felt good or not. But it sounds to me like that's a dangerous road to take. And so how can we challenge our feelings in such a way, especially for managers, directors, CFOs, vice presidents, so that the decision that we're making is not actually a gut decision, is actually based on something a little more robust than that?
Okay. I'm going to give you a long answer for that one. Okay. I teach statistics in the university. That's when I do marketing research. So we have to teach a lot about statistics. And one of the things that you actually find out about statistics is that humans suck at statistics. Even people that actually do it professionally, when you follow your gut feeling, you're going to be wrong 90% of the time. Okay. So I would say your gut feeling is it's a good way to start. I think it's a good way to start because that's aligned with your values. So if you look at your brain composition, the neurons that you have in your brain, you will actually find the same type of cell in your heart as well as in your stomach. Okay. This is why when you are fearful, you notice that your stomach just only shrinks, and you feel like that's because of that, because there's actually thinking cells in your stomach. A way of saying it is not correct, but it's the way of saying it. I think it's a good way to start like that. I agree. I agree that, when you have a gut feeling, that's a good initial action, but then ask yourself, okay, what is some of the assumptions that I'm making? And it's more time consuming. There's a very good book by Daniel Kahneman. He actually talks about system 1 and system 2, slow thinking and fast thinking. I probably have it someplace around here. I don't see it around now. But it's an excellent book that basically talks about how we take 80% of our decisions very quickly. Okay, so you're walking, you see something, you just change the way you're walking. You see somebody, you start talking to certain, and this is actually related with the way that our brain, our body likes to economize energy. We don't like to use too much energy, so we usually go in inertia, you know. But then when we have to do something like math, we actually have to slow down because math doesn't come naturally to anybody, you know. So you have to actually put more thought into it. You have to put more. And that's what he called the slow thinking. You suddenly have to actually go to your frontal lobe, and your frontal lobe takes a lot of energy. It's actually very tiresome. The way that he compared it, he said is like if you're riding an elephant, okay, you may be able to actually correct the elephant once in a while, but the elephant has a lot of inertia. You're not going to be able to control that elephant. That's our unconscious. That's that gut feeling that you were talking about, Pablo. So when you get that gut feeling, go with it, but then start questioning, okay, why do I feel like this? Ask people that have different perspectives. You know, my wife has always been very candid with me. So when I actually say something she doesn't agree, she actually goes always trying to find the other way. I was trained, I was actually in a French school my whole life until I was 17. So in the French education, they actually teach you to debate. You know, so the whole time when you come out with one argument, you're actually trying to figure out what is the counter argument, and you're trying to come out with a counter argument, you know. And this is something that have been taught. That's the critical thinking that I was talking about. I would say go with your gut feeling, but then start questioning it. Okay, why do I feel like this? Why do I think that's correct? Try to get different perspective. This is actually what I'm thinking we should be doing. What do you think? And this is where diversity comes in, because if you ask somebody that has a different background, either just because of a race, gender, education, ethnic background, whatever it is, they may actually say, well, that doesn't make much sense because of this, you know, so you're getting different perspectives. And eventually you can take the decision. It is more time consuming. It is much more time consuming than just going with your gut feeling, but you're going to get better results.
Thank you.
Yep.
Anybody else? Comments, questions, or 1, 2, 3. Okay. So if anybody else has another business that they want to talk about, happy to do it. If not, if you were willing and able to share your contact information in the chat, certainly in my case, I will be in touch with you. And that's all for me. Again, thank you so much, Juan. I really appreciate it. I really like it, and I'm you know, I don't know. That's all. Thank you, Tariq. I don't know if you want to
present the book. Thank you very much to all of you. Thanks for